The wind that swept through the streets of Chicago that December night carried shards of ice sharp enough to sting the skin. Streetlights flickered weakly above the narrow alleys, their yellow glow reflecting on puddles of dirty snow. Somewhere in that cold labyrinth of noise and shadows, a 16-year-old girl pressed her arms around herself, trying to keep the chill from cutting through her thin hoodie. Her name was Emily Rivers, and in another life, she might have been at home under a warm blanket, listening to her mother's soft voice calling her to dinner. But that world was gone, shattered 6 months earlier on a rain-slicked highway when a semi lost control and took both her parents away in a single heartbeat. In the weeks that followed, Emily's world unraveled with cruel speed. Her father's sister, a woman named Carol Rivers, took her in at first, promising to look after her until she got back on her feet. But the promise turned to poison the day the insurance check arrived. Carol and her husband wasted no time cashing it, whispering excuses about debts and repairs, about what Emily owed them for taking her in. Within a month, the house that had once smelled of coffee and candles became a battlefield of slammed doors and shouted words. When Emily refused to hand over the last of her parents' belongings, a watch, a few photos, a necklace that had belonged to her mother Carol's husband, threw her suitcase onto the porch and locked the door. That was the night the streets became her only shelter. She wandered first through bus stations and laundromats that stayed open late, then through the underpasses where other forgotten souls huddled under cardboard and blankets that reeked of smoke. The first days were the hardest. Hunger clawed at her stomach like an animal. She tried begging near convenience stores, but most people turned away, pretending not to see her. A few tossed coins, some muttered curses. Once, a man offered her a meal in exchange for things she didn't dare imagine. She ran until her lungs burned, learning quickly that survival meant staying invisible. Winter tightened its grip on the city. Every breath came out as fog. Emily found a spot behind an old warehouse where a vent released warm air. It wasn't much, but it kept her alive through the longest nights. She would wake to the distant hum of traffic, the sound of trains moaning through the cold, and tell herself she would find work, any work, before the week ended. But no one wanted to hire a teenage girl without an address, without ID, without anything but the clothes she wore. One morning, after 2 nights without real sleep, she wandered downtown where the buildings grew taller and the sidewalks cleaner. Her shoes, once white, were stiff with grime. Her fingers trembled inside the sleeves she used as gloves. People rushed past her, coats buttoned, scarves tight, earbuds sealing them inside their own worlds. She wanted to scream that she existed, that she needed help, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. Hunger was louder than pride now. The scent of roasted coffee drifted from a cafe, and for a moment Emily pressed her face against the glass, watching people laugh over steaming mugs. Inside, a little boy spilled whipped cream on his nose, and his mother smiled, wiping it away. The sight pierced Emily like a blade. She turned and kept walking until her feet brought her to a street lined with restaurants and boutiques, glittering with holiday lights. At the corner stood a building of glass and steel, its windows gleaming like mirrors. A gold sign above the entrance read, "Skyline Bistro." The name shimmered under the weak winter sun. Emily hesitated on the curb. Through the window she could see waiters in black uniforms, couples at tables, plates of burgers, pasta, and golden fries carried past smiling faces. The smell reached her even through the glass smoke: butter, roasted meat, and bread. Her stomach cramped violently. For a long moment she simply stood there, torn between shame and desperation. Then a gust of wind hit her full in the chest, and something inside her snapped. Hunger drowned out fear. She pulled the door open. Warmth struck her like a wave. For a few seconds she just stood there, blinking against the light. The chatter of voices, the clinking of glasses, the soft notes of jazz from the speakers, all of it seemed unreal. Heads turned. A hostess in a crisp shirt frowned, her practiced smile freezing mid-gesture. "Miss, may I help you?" she asked, though her tone implied she wished otherwise. Emily's voice came out rough. "Please, I'm hungry. Could I maybe have something to eat? Anything." The hostess looked around, unsure. A man at the bar chuckled under his breath. "This isn't a shelter," someone muttered. Heat flooded Emily's face. "I'll leave soon. I just—" But the woman shook her head firmly and pointed toward the door. "You can't be here, sweetheart." Emily turned away, ready to leave, when she noticed a table near the window. The man who'd been sitting there had just stepped outside to take a call, leaving behind a half-eaten burger and fries, still steaming. The smell wrapped around her senses like a drug. She looked toward the counter. No one was watching her. Her stomach twisted again, and before her mind could protest, her hand reached out. She grabbed the burger and took a bite. The first taste was heaven and pain at once. Warm bread, salty meat, melted cheese. It filled her mouth, filled the emptiness that had lived in her for months. She devoured another bite, trembling. Then a shout sliced through the music. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" The man had returned, his phone still in hand, eyes blazing. The entire restaurant fell silent. Forks paused midair. The hostess gasped. Emily froze, the half-eaten burger still in her hands. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I was hungry." "Hungry? Then go beg outside," he snapped. "You can't just steal food here." He grabbed her wrist, but before he could drag her toward the door, another voice spoke from across the room. Calm, deep, resonant. "Let her go. I'll pay." The man turned. At a table near the back sat Adam Coleman, a name most of the city's newspapers knew well. CEO of a technology firm that built smart home systems, investor, philanthropist. His face had graced magazines and billboards. Yet in that moment he was just a tall, quiet man in a dark coat, eyes steady and unreadable. He rose slowly, his chair sliding back against the floor. "Bring her to me," he said. The angry man hesitated, then released her. The hostess motioned for Emily to follow, still unsure whether this was mercy or madness. She walked toward the stranger, each step heavy as stone. When she reached his table, she lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Adam studied her for a long moment. Her cheeks were hollow, her hair tangled, but there was something fierce in the way she stood, defiance wrapped in exhaustion. "You're hungry," he said finally. "Sit down." She shook her head. "I shouldn't. They'll call the police." "They won't," he replied simply and gestured to the seat. The waitress appeared, nervously holding a pad. "Mr. Coleman, should I—" "Bring her a full meal," he interrupted. "Whatever she wants, and a hot drink." The woman nodded and hurried away. Around them, whispers rose and fell. Emily sat rigid, unsure whether to run or cry. When the food arrived, a plate stacked with fries, a cheeseburger, and a cup of cocoa, she stared at it as though it might vanish. Adam nodded once. "Eat!" She took a slow bite, then another, unable to stop the tears that blurred her vision. Between mouthfuls, she whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Adam leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible." When she finished, he asked for the check, paid for both meals, and told her to follow him outside. The winter air bit harder after the warmth of the restaurant. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. "Where do you live?" he asked. She hesitated. "Nowhere." "Do you have family?" She shook her head. He sighed, glancing at the sleek black car waiting by the curb. "Get in. You'll catch pneumonia out here." She froze. "I can't." "You can," he said quietly. "You need help. I have room." She stared at him, unsure whether to trust a stranger offering kindness in a world that had given her only cruelty. But something in his voice steady, certain made her believe him. Slowly she stepped toward the car. The driver opened the door, and she slid inside, the smell of leather and warmth enveloping her. As the city lights blurred past the window, Emily pressed her forehead against the glass. For the first time in months she felt safe, yet a knot of fear coiled in her stomach. Nothing in her life had ever lasted. People's kindness always came with a price. Still, as she looked at the man sitting beside her, silent and thoughtful, she dared to hope that maybe this time would be different. Adam's house stood on a hill overlooking the lake, its windows glowing softly against the dark. When the car stopped, he stepped out and turned to her. "This is my home," he said. "You can stay for a while until you're back on your feet." She nodded numbly, following him up the path lined with frozen hedges. Inside, warmth and the scent of cedar wrapped around her. The foyer gleamed with polished wood and quiet light. She stood motionless, afraid to touch anything. A middle-aged woman appeared at the top of the stairs, elegant and composed. "Mr. Coleman," she asked. "Who's this?" "Her name is Emily," Adams said. "She'll be staying here for now. Prepare a room for her, please." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, sir." Emily sensed the chill behind those words, but she was too exhausted to care. The last thing she remembered that night was lying on a soft bed, clean sheets under her cheek, her body trembling, not from cold, but from disbelief. For the first time in months, she slept without fear. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen lake, but inside the mansion, a fragile thread of hope had begun to weave itself through the wreckage of her life. She didn't know yet that the warmth of that house would soon reveal new kinds of cold envy, pride, and the silent wars fought behind polished doors. But for that single night, Emily allowed herself to dream that she had finally come home. Morning came quietly to the Coleman estate. Outside, the lake shimmered under a pale sheet of frost, and the first sunlight painted long golden lines across the marble floors. Emily woke to the unfamiliar comfort of a soft mattress and clean sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. For a few seconds she lay still, staring at the high ceiling, half convinced it was a dream that would fade the moment she moved. The last thing she remembered was falling asleep fully dressed, her head sinking into the pillow like a weight lifted off her shoulders. Now, sunlight streamed through tall windows framed by heavy curtains, and a tray of breakfast eggs, toast, and steaming tea waited on a table nearby. She sat up slowly, feeling small and out of place in the vast room. The bedspread was thick, the furniture polished, the air warm. It was everything the streets had stolen from her: comfort, safety, belonging. Yet instead of peace, she felt a faint unease, as if the house itself were watching her. She approached the tray, touched the edge of the cup, and whispered to herself, "Don't wake up yet." A knock on the door broke the stillness. A tall woman in a neat gray uniform entered, her movements precise and controlled. "Good morning," she said with a polite smile that carried no warmth. "I'm Mrs. Hudson, the housekeeper. Mr. Coleman asked me to check on you." Emily nodded nervously. "Thank you, ma'am." The woman's eyes traveled over her worn clothes, the faded hoodie folded at the foot of the bed, and for a brief moment, disapproval flickered across her face. "Mr. Coleman has gone to the city for a meeting," Mrs. Hudson said. "He asked that you make yourself comfortable. You'll find fresh clothes in the closet. Once you're ready, come downstairs." When she left, Emily opened the closet and froze. Rows of neatly arranged dresses, shirts, and shoes filled the space. Everything was too new, too beautiful for someone like her. She touched the fabric of a simple sweater and hesitated, then changed into it. As she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The girl reflected there still had hollow cheeks and tired eyes, but there was color in her skin again, a faint trace of life returning. Downstairs, the house buzzed quietly with routine. The kitchen smelled of coffee and baked bread. Maids moved swiftly, avoiding Emily's gaze as she passed. She felt their eyes on her back, the whispers they tried to hide. She stepped into the dining room, where long windows opened toward the lake. On the far end of the table lay a folded note in Adam Coleman's handwriting. "Eat well. You'll need strength for new beginnings." Emily ate slowly, unsure if she was even allowed to sit there. Each bite filled her with gratitude and discomfort. She was used to scraps, not fine porcelain and silver cutlery. After breakfast, she wandered through the halls, taking in the quiet grandeur. Portraits of cities and bridges hung on the walls. Bookshelves lined an entire corridor. Every corner spoke of discipline and order, of a man who had built his world with precision. By noon, the sound of car tires on gravel signaled Adam's return. He entered the foyer with a file in hand, his long coat still dusted with snow. When he saw Emily waiting nervously near the stairs, he gave a faint nod. "You're awake." "Good. Did you eat?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir, thank you." He gestured toward the sitting room. "Come, we should talk." They sat by a low table where the fire crackled softly in the fireplace. Adam's eyes, sharp but kind, studied her face. "You've been through a great deal," he said, "but if you're willing to try, I can help you start again." Emily lowered her eyes. "I don't want to be a burden." He shook his head. "You're not." I was given chances once. Now it's my turn to give one. He explained that she would stay in the house for as long as she needed, that she would have food, clothes, and a safe place to sleep. But I also expect something in return, he added. Not money, effort. You will learn, read, grow. I'll arrange a tutor for you. The words stunned her. For so long she had been treated as if she were invisible, incapable of anything beyond survival. You mean school? She asked quietly. Something like that, he said. Education gives freedom. If you want to change your life, start there. That evening, Emily sat by the window in her room, watching the city lights flicker beyond the lake. She thought of her parents, of the home they had built with laughter and warmth. She whispered to herself that maybe they would be proud of her now. But beneath the hope, another feeling stirred. Fear. The mansion was beautiful, but it wasn't friendly. The staff moved around her like shadows, silent and judging. When she passed them, the air seemed to grow colder. Mrs. Hudson, in particular, had a gaze that sliced deeper than words. She carried herself with authority, her chin high, her lips tight. That night, when Emily came down to dinner, she felt the tension before she even entered the dining hall. The table stretched endlessly, covered in fine china and crystal glasses. Two maids stood by the wall, and Mrs. Hudson sat at the far end, her back straight as a rod. Adam hadn't returned yet, so the room belonged to the housekeeper's control. Sit, Mrs. Hudson said without looking up from her tablet. Emily obeyed quietly, her heart beating fast. For a few moments there was only the sound of utensils and the faint ticking of the clock. Then the housekeeper spoke, her voice smooth but cold. You must understand, Mr. Coleman is a very generous man, but generosity can be dangerous if it's wasted. Emily blinked, unsure if she should answer. Yes, ma'am, she murmured. I don't want to waste anything. Mrs. Hudson set down her fork and looked at her directly. You're young. You've lived on the street. It's easy for people like you to forget gratitude once comfort returns. Don't make that mistake here. The words burned, but Emily said nothing. She focused on the plate before her until she heard footsteps approaching. Adam entered the room, removing his coat. Good evening, he greeted, and Mrs. Hudson's expression changed instantly, polite, deferential, obedient. Emily noticed it, and something inside her shifted. For the first time, she understood that kindness in this house was measured by who was watching. Dinner passed quietly after that. Adam spoke of his company, of projects expanding overseas, of a foundation that supported youth programs. Emily listened, fascinated. When the meal ended, he told her to rest well, and that her tutor would arrive in a few days. You'll do fine, he said as he turned to leave. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. In the days that followed, Emily tried to find her place. She helped the kitchen staff set tables, carried laundry to the utility room, and kept mostly to herself. Yet no matter how she tried, the whispers persisted. When she entered a room, conversation stopped. She often caught glances exchanged behind her back. Still, she refused to complain. She had learned on the streets that silence was safer than confrontation. One afternoon, as she carried a tray of clean glasses to the dining room, she overheard two maids near the door. Can you believe she's staying here? One whispered. Mr. Coleman must have lost his mind. A homeless girl in his house. The other giggled. Maybe he's feeling guilty about something, or maybe she's got some trick up her sleeve. Their laughter followed Emily down the hall like smoke. That evening, when Adam called her into his study, she feared she had done something wrong. But he only handed her a small notebook. For your lessons, he said, and for your thoughts, write them down. The best way to heal is to remember what you survived. She turned the notebook over in her hands, tracing the gold initials embossed on the cover. Thank you, she whispered. He smiled faintly. You don't need to thank me, Emily. Just promise me you won't give up on yourself. When he left, she sat in the quiet study, the firelight dancing across the shelves, and began to write for the first time in years. Her handwriting was shaky, but each letter felt like a step away from the darkness she had lived in. Mrs. Hudson saw her through the half-open door and frowned. Later that night, she met with Michael, the assistant who had worked beside Adam for years. Michael was tall, sharply dressed, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed he belonged at the top. But beneath that polish lay a restless bitterness. He poured a drink and handed one to Mrs. Hudson. "So, how's our new guest adjusting?" he asked. The woman's lips curved slightly. "Too comfortably. The boss seems rather taken with her story." Michael's eyes narrowed. "He's sentimental. Always was. It'll pass. Still, I can't help wondering what's so special about her. One street kid, and suddenly he's father of the year." "She has his attention," Mrs. Hudson said pointedly. "And people like you don't enjoy being replaced." Michael smirked, but said nothing. The fire crackled between them. "If she's really planning to stay, maybe we should remind her where she came from," he said at last. Mrs. Hudson's eyes glinted. "Careful. He trusts her more than he should." He took a slow sip of his drink. "Trust can be broken." Upstairs, Emily sat by her window again, unaware of the storm gathering beneath the calm. She watched snow begin to fall over the lake, blanketing the frozen surface in quiet white. The world outside looked peaceful, untouched, but deep down she sensed that peace was fragile. The mansion, for all its warmth and beauty, held secrets in its walls, whispers of envy, pride, and ambition. And though she didn't know it yet, she was standing at the center of it all. Before she went to bed, she opened the notebook Adam had given her and wrote a single line across the first page. "I will not be broken again." Then she closed it carefully, slid it under her pillow, and turned off the lamp. Downstairs, unseen, Michael's shadow passed through the hall like a warning. The house on the hill slept under a veil of snow, but in its silence, something darker began to stir. A quiet resentment that would soon reach for her with sharp and unseen hands. Snow continued to fall for days, muffling the world in white silence. Emily had begun to find a rhythm in the housewake early, help in the kitchen, study with the tutor Adam had hired, and spend evenings reading by the fire. Slowly she grew more confident, speaking without fear when Adam asked about her lessons, smiling more freely when she passed SAM in the hallway. For the first time in months, she could feel something like peace growing inside her, small and fragile, but real. Yet the peace made others restless. The walls of the house were filled with unspoken tension, as though its beauty itself resented her presence. Mrs. Hudson and Michael spoke little to her directly, but their disapproval thickened the air. If she entered a room, they left with polite excuses. When Adam praised her efforts, Mrs. Hudson's eyes hardened, and Michael's smile became a little tighter. Adam noticed none of it. His days were consumed by work, meetings, and endless calls. To him, the house was a place of order, where people did their jobs and harmony was assumed. He could not imagine that beneath his calm domain, resentment was beginning to grow like rot beneath polished wood. One morning, while Emily was dusting the shelves in the library, she heard low voices near the study door. "He's losing his sense," Michael was saying, "taking in a stray girl off the street. It's not charity, it's madness." Mrs. Hudson's voice followed, sharper, colder. "He's blinded by guilt. You know what he's like, always needing to save someone. But this time he's gone too far. The staff are talking and I can't say I blame them. She doesn't belong here." Emily froze behind the shelves, her hands trembling around the rags she held. She should have walked away, but her feet felt rooted to the floor. "Then why don't you tell him?" Michael's tone was laced with amusement. "You've worked for him long enough. You're practically family." Mrs. Hudson sighed. "He wouldn't listen. He trusts her already. And you know what that means for the rest of us." Michael's voice lowered. "Maybe it's time he saw her for what she is. A liar. A thief. People like her don't change. They just adapt to better opportunities." Their footsteps faded, leaving Emily alone with the echo of their words. She sank into a chair, her heart pounding. They wanted her gone. She had suspected it, but hearing it aloud cut deep. She had done nothing wrong, at least. She believed she hadn't. But she also knew how fragile trust could be. She'd seen good people turn cold overnight. That evening, she tried to tell Adam what she'd overheard, but when she entered his study, he was surrounded by files, his phone pressed to his ear. He smiled briefly, motioned for her to wait, then turned away to finish the call. She stood silently watching him. He looked tired, older than she'd noticed before. When he hung up, he rubbed his temples. Emily, I'm sorry. Today's been chaos. What was it you wanted to tell me? She opened her mouth, then hesitated. If she accused his trusted employees and he didn't believe her, she might lose everything. It's nothing, she said finally. Just thank you for everything you've done. He gave her a gentle smile. You don't owe me thanks. Just do your best. The rest will take care of itself. But nothing took care of itself. That night, Mrs. Hudson came to her room unexpectedly. She carried a folded blanket and a tight smile. Mr. Coleman will be away for 3 days, she said. I'll be in charge as usual. Try not to make trouble. And please remember, this house has rules. Yes, ma'am, Emily whispered. Good. Mrs. Hudson turned to leave, then paused. It's easy to forget where we came from when life gets comfortable. I hope you won't forget. When the door closed, Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. The next day passed uneasily. Adam left early, his car disappearing down the long driveway. The house seemed larger without him, emptier. Emily spent the morning helping Sam polish the silverware. He was kind as always, humming softly while he worked. You shouldn't worry so much, he said when he noticed her pale face. The boss likes you. That's what matters. I think the others don't, she said quietly. SM shrugged. That's their problem. Keep your head high, kid. Time shows who's real. But time, it seemed, had different plans. That evening after dinner, Mrs. Hudson called Emily into the study. The safe in Mr. Coleman's office has been tampered with, she said sternly. We're missing cash. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Emily blinked, stunned. No, I didn't even know there was a safe. Mrs. Hudson's expression was unreadable. We'll see. Michael and I will be checking the rooms. For now, please stay in yours. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Emily stumbled upstairs, her heart pounding. In her room, she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. They were setting her up, she knew it now. But how could she prove it? Who would believe her over them? She thought of Adam's calm face, the trust in his eyes. Would that disappear once he heard their story? Hours passed before the footsteps came. The door opened and Michael entered with Mrs. Hudson behind him. They went straight to the small drawer where she kept her few belongings. He pulled it open, reached inside, and froze theatrically. Well, well, he murmured. In his hand was a thick envelope. He opened it, revealing crisp bills. Emily's voice broke. That's not mine. You put that there. Michael raised an eyebrow. You're accusing me? Careful, girl. You're already in enough trouble. Mrs. Hudson crossed her arms. I think we've seen enough. Mr. Coleman will decide what to do when he returns. Until then, you'll stay in the storage room downstairs. For your own safety, of course. They led her down to the small room near the pantry, a narrow space with no windows, just a cot and the faint smell of detergent. When the door locked behind her, she pressed her forehead to the wood, tears burning her eyes. It was happening again, the same cycle of blame, disbelief, and loss. She thought she had escaped it, but the world had found another way to strip her of everything. Through the darkness, she heard SM's voice calling her name. Emily, what's going on? He rattled the door handle, but it didn't budge. They said you stole money, he said, disbelief in his tone. I didn't, she cried. They put it in my drawer. You have to believe me. There was silence for a moment, then his quiet reply. I do. Don't worry, I'll find out the truth. When he left, she sank onto the cot, clutching the small notebook Adam had given her. She opened it and wrote with shaking hands. They want me gone, but I won't run. Morning came slow and gray. The door opened, and Mrs. Hudson placed a tray of bread and water on the floor. Eat, she said curtly. You'll need your strength. Emily looked up, her eyes red but steady. Why are you doing this? I never hurt you. Mrs. Hudson's face flickered for an instant. Guilt, or perhaps pity, but it vanished as quickly as it came. Because you don't belong here, she said. You never did. Then she closed the door again. Hours later, tires crunched on the gravel outside. Adam had returned. From the hallway came raised voices, Michael's smooth tone, Mrs. Hudson's anxious defense. We found the missing money in her drawer, sir, she said. You can see for yourself. It's clear she took it. Adam's voice cut through, sharp and cold. Where is she? When the door finally opened, Emily looked up to see him standing there, his face pale with disbelief. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "No," she whispered. "I swear it's not." Michael stepped forward. "Sir, with all respect, the evidence speaks for itself. We even checked the safe. The amount matches what we found in her room." Sam appeared at the end of the hall, breathless. "Sir, I need to speak." "Not now, Sam," Michael interrupted. But Sam's voice rose. "Now, because I saw Mrs. Hudson last night. She went into the girl's room when she thought no one was watching." The hallway fell silent. Adam turned slowly toward his housekeeper. "Is that true?" Mrs. Hudson's composure cracked. I only went to check." "To check what?" His tone was low, dangerous. "The room of a girl you accuse of theft? Without my permission?" Michael started to speak, but Adam cut him off. "Enough. Both of you. I trusted you." He turned to Sam. "Unlock her room." Minutes later, Emily stepped into the light, blinking as the door opened. Her face was pale, her hands still trembling, but her eyes were dry now. She looked at Adam, waiting for judgment. Instead, he said quietly, "You're coming with me." They walked to his study, where the open envelope of money still lay on the desk. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," he said. "I should have seen it sooner." She shook her head. "It's not your fault." "It is," he said. "I let people close to me forget what honesty means." That afternoon, Mrs. Hudson and Michael packed their things under Sam's watchful eye. Neither spoke. Adam didn't bother with farewells. When the car drove away down the long road, a heavy silence filled the house. Later, as snow began to fall again, Emily stood by the window, watching the flakes drift past the glass. Adam joined her, his voice quiet. "I meant what I said before. This is your home now. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone." She looked up at him, her throat tight. "You really trust me?" "Yes," he said simply, "because you've already shown me who you are." That night when she went to bed, the house felt different, still vast, still filled with echoes but no longer hostile. The fear that had haunted her since the night she entered the restaurant began to fade, replaced by something gentler, hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she believed she might survive it. Outside, the snowstorm quieted. The lights of the city flickered faintly beyond the frozen lake, and in the great house on the hill, a fragile peace returned, though neither Emily nor Adam yet knew that the calm would not last. Shadows had a way of returning, even after the darkest night had passed. Weeks passed quietly after Michael and Mrs. Hudson were gone. The house breathed easier, as if the walls themselves had been released from some invisible tension. The staff that remained treated Emily with cautious respect. Sam especially became her closest ally, teaching her small things that made her feel less like a guest and more like someone who belonged. He showed her how to care for the flowers in the glass house, how to polish wood without streaking it, how to read the quiet moods of the mansion. Emily's studies continued as well, and under the patient guidance of her tutor, she began to excel, her quick mind drinking in everything she had once been denied. Adam often came home late, but he always found time to ask about her progress. Their conversations grew warmer, less guarded. He spoke to her not as a benefactor to a dependent, but as one human being to another, bound by a shared understanding of loss. When he mentioned that he had once grown up in foster homes, drifting between families before he built his empire, Emily felt a thread of kinship stronger than any bond she'd known. She saw in him not the image of a powerful man, but the shadow of the boy he must have been, hungry, unseen, and determined to survive. By the time spring crept into the city, the snow on the lake had melted into glittering ripples. The garden bloomed, and Emily began volunteering at a community center Adam supported downtown. She helped serve food to homeless youth, some her own age, and each time she handed out a plate, she thought of the night in Skyline Bistro when hunger had driven her through that door. Life had come full circle, but peace was always a fragile thing. While Emily's world was healing, somewhere in the darker corners of the city, another story was beginning. Michael, now stripped of his position and privileges, wandered through weeks of bitterness. His pride was wounded deeper than he admitted. Adam's dismissal had not only cost him wealth, but the sense of importance he had built his life around. In smoky bars and empty apartments, he nursed his resentment, drinking it like medicine until it turned into something sharper: vengeance. He told himself he had been loyal, that everything he had done had been for the company, for order. And yet a girl from the streets had replaced him, stealing not only his job, but the man's trust he had spent years earning. One evening, as rain drummed against his window, he met with a man named Felix Grant, a businessman on paper, though his dealings ran far below the law's reach. Felix had once been denied a contract by Adam's company, and his smile carried the kind of charm that hides cruelty. They met in a dim restaurant, both men pretending it was a chance encounter. "I heard you and Mr. Coleman parted ways," Felix said casually, swirling his drink. "Unfortunate. You were always the practical one." Michael gave a short laugh. "He doesn't need practical people anymore. He has a charity case now, a street girl who's got him wrapped around her finger." Felix's eyebrows lifted. "Really? Now that's interesting. A man like Coleman, distracted by sympathy, that could make him vulnerable." Michael said nothing for a moment, but the silence between them grew heavy, alive with possibilities. Felix leaned forward. "I've been waiting for an opportunity to remind our dear Adam that emotions make poor business partners. Maybe we can help each other." That night marked the beginning of a quiet conspiracy. Over the next months, Felix's contacts began collecting information, digging through public records and private rumors, piecing together a story that didn't have to be true. It only had to sound believable. They forged documents suggesting that Emily's appearance in Adam's life wasn't chance at all, that she had been guided there by someone who sought to exploit his wealth. They created emails, signatures, a paper trail of deceit. By the time they were done, they had built a lie so polished it could almost pass as truth. The first article appeared online one morning in late May. "Billionaire Adam Coleman and his mysterious ward. Charity or manipulation?" It was written with the precision of a knife. The journalist quoted anonymous sources, hinted at stolen funds, and even published photos of Emily leaving the mansion. Photos Felix's men had taken from afar. The story spread like wildfire. Within hours, the company's phones were flooded with calls. Shareholders demanded explanations, and Adam's publicist begged him to issue a statement. Emily learned of it when she arrived at the community center. A volunteer handed her a newspaper, her face pale. "Is it true?" she whispered. Emily stared at the headline, her breath catching. The article twisted everything she had lived through: her hunger, her rescue, her gratitude, turning it into something ugly. "Street orphan manipulates CEO for fortune." When she returned home, reporters were already waiting outside the gate. Cameras flashed as she passed, their questions like stones. "Did you target Mr. Coleman? Are you after his money? How long have you been living with him?" She ran inside, her heart pounding, the sound of shutters chasing her into the foyer. Adam was in his study, the newspaper spread open before him. His expression was unreadable, but there was exhaustion in his eyes. "I suppose you've seen it," he said. She nodded, her throat dry. "It's all lies. You have to believe me." "I do," he said quietly. "But the world won't. Not yet. They're saying I used you, that I wanted your money." He looked up at her, his voice steady but heavy. "You can't fight rumors, Emily. They die slower than truth." Tears stung her eyes. "Then let me go. If I leave, they'll stop." He shook his head. "You think running will fix it? That's what they expect. You have nothing to prove to them." But that night, alone in her room, she thought of leaving anyway. The mansion that had once felt like shelter now felt like a cage. Every sound outside could be another reporter, every phone call another accusation. She wanted to disappear, to save the one person who had shown her kindness from the ruin that followed her. It was SM who stopped her. He found her in the hallway with a packed bag, her coat already on. "Where are you going?" "I can't stay," she said. "They're destroying him because of me." He shook his head. "He took you in because he believed in you. Don't throw that away now. If you run, you prove them right." His words held her there. For days she stayed hidden, avoiding the windows, watching as the world outside twisted the story further. On social media, Strangers debated her life as if she were a character in a film. Some pitied her, others mocked her. Adam's company lost contracts. His investors threatened withdrawal. The man who had once been celebrated as a visionary now faced whispers of scandal. Felix and Michael watched from the sidelines, their plan unfolding perfectly. "He'll break soon," Felix said one night, lighting a cigar. "When his company bleeds enough, he'll step down, and then we move in." Michael stared at the newspaper photo of Emily, her face turned away from the camera, fragile and lost. For a brief second, guilt flickered in his chest, but it died quickly. He told himself she had chosen her side. Inside the mansion, Adam worked tirelessly to contain the damage. Lawyers came and went. His public relations team issued statements. But the rumors had already taken root. "The only thing worse than lies," he told Emily one evening, "is the silence that follows them. People stop asking what's true." She looked at him helplessly. "What can I do?" "Nothing," he said. "Not yet. But the truth has a way of finding light if you're patient." Patience, however, was the one thing neither of them had left. One afternoon, while reviewing the security logs for the office, Adam noticed something odd: a digital signature on an email allegedly sent from his account to Felix Grant weeks before the scandal broke. Only he hadn't written it. The message contained attachments, copies of supposed payment transfers to Emily's name. But the dates didn't align with any real transaction. Suspicion flickered in his mind, sharp and cold. Someone had forged his credentials. He called SAM to his office. "Check the old security drives," he said, "the ones from February. I want to see every visitor, every login." For 2 nights they combed through footage and files until finally they found it, a recording of Michael in the office late at night, typing at the main computer. The timestamp matched the forged messages. Adam's expression hardened. "Get me the rest, and make copies. We're going to end this." The next morning he called the police. By evening, officers arrived with warrants. Felix was arrested in his downtown office, Michael at his apartment. The news broke faster than the first rumor had spread, but this time the story carried proof. Video, documents, testimony. The same networks that had branded Emily a manipulator now called her a victim of conspiracy. When the journalists came again, Adam faced them himself. Standing at the gates of his home, he spoke plainly. The truth was never lost. It was buried by greed. The young woman you shamed and hunted is not a con artist. She is courage, compassion, and survival. If my mistake was believing in her, then I'll make that mistake every day. The following days blurred into quiet recovery. The world moved on to other scandals, as it always did. Yet something inside Emily had changed. The innocence she had carried when she first entered his house was gone, replaced by a deeper strength. She had seen what envy could do, what lies could destroy, and she knew she would never be the same. That night she sat on the steps by the lake, the air cool and still. Adam joined her, his coat over his arm. "It's over," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, it's just beginning." He looked at her curiously and she smiled faintly. "You once said education gives freedom. I want to use mine, to help others who were like me. Kids who think no one sees them." He nodded slowly, pride glinting behind his tired eyes. "Then you'll need more than books. You'll need faith and allies." "I have both," she said. When he left her to the quiet of the evening, Emily stayed, watching the moon ripple across the water. The mansion behind her was no longer a stranger's house. It was home, a place built not of marble and glass, but of second chances. And though the shadows had been defeated, she knew life would test her again. But this time she would not face it alone. For somewhere beyond that silver horizon, her next chapter was already waiting. A story not of survival, but of purpose. Summer came to the lake with slow warmth, softening the hard outlines of the city and filling the air with the scent of lilac and rain. The mansion on the hill glowed gently in the long evenings, its windows catching the last light like small fires. Inside, life began to return to something resembling normal. The scandal that had nearly destroyed Adam Coleman's name was fading into memory, replaced by new headlines and fresher controversies. His company, though scarred, recovered with remarkable speed, and the few loyal partners who had stood by him now treated his resilience as proof of his character. For Emily, the weeks after the storm felt like a second awakening. She was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled into Skyline Bistro. She was steadier, her eyes brighter, her voice firmer. The fear of being unwanted had been replaced by a quiet determination to become worthy of the faith that had saved her. She spent her mornings studying and her afternoons volunteering again, though this time her presence drew attention for different reasons. Newspapers now told her story not as scandal, but as redemption. Reporters called her the girl who fought back, and though the words embarrassed her, she couldn't deny their power. Donations to the community center increased. Strangers sent letters of gratitude and hope. Some nights she and Adam would sit by the lake, and he would tell her that what she'd endured had meaning beyond either of them, that people saw themselves in her survival. She would smile faintly and say that perhaps they could turn that meaning into something tangible, something that might outlast the noise of fame. The idea of a foundation began as a passing thought. One evening, Emily mentioned that the shelters downtown were overcrowded again, and that many of the kids had nowhere to go once they turned 18. "They'd just fall through the cracks," she said, "like I almost did." Adam listened, his gaze thoughtful. "Then build something that catches them," he replied. "Not charity, opportunity." The words stayed with her. Over the following weeks, she drafted plans, scribbling notes late into the night, outlining programs for housing, education, and mentorship. When she presented them to Adam, expecting him to smile politely and change the subject, he surprised her. "It's good," he said. "Too big for one person, but good. Let's make it real." They named it Second Chance. For a time, it seemed that life had finally balanced its scales. Emily visited schools, spoke to donors, and met young people whose stories mirrored her own. Each time she looked into their faces, she remembered hunger, cold, and the terrible loneliness of being unseen. She vowed that no one would endure it if she could help it. But peace, like the seasons, was fleeting. Shadows do not die easily. They wait for the right hour to return. It was late one evening when the first sign came. Emily had stayed late at the foundation's new office downtown, sorting through files. The street outside was nearly empty, the hum of traffic reduced to a distant whisper. She locked the doors, gathered her papers, and stepped into the alley that led to the parking lot. The air was thick with the smell of rain. She heard footsteps behind her, steady, deliberate. Before she could turn, something hard struck her from the side. Pain exploded in her temple, and the world tilted into darkness. When she woke, the first thing she noticed was the cold. The floor beneath her was concrete, damp and rough. A dim light flickered above, revealing crates stacked against rusted walls. She tried to move, but her wrists were bound. Panic flared, but reason followed. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to listen. Somewhere nearby, voices murmured. Two men arguing in low tones. She recognized one immediately. "You didn't tell me you'd hurt her," Michael's voice hissed. "She's fine," came the other, smoother, crueler. "Felix. Alive, at least. We only need her as leverage." Michael cursed under his breath. "This wasn't the deal. I said we'd make him pay, not—" Felix laughed softly. "You still don't understand power, do you? Coleman took everything from me. You think I'll let him walk away because you've grown a conscience?" "I didn't sign up for kidnapping," Michael snapped. Felix's tone hardened. "Then walk away. But if you do, don't expect to survive the fallout. You're in this as deep as I am now." Emily closed her eyes, her heart pounding. She remembered the night she'd been locked in the storage room, the helplessness that had swallowed her then. But this time was different. She wasn't that girl anymore. She would not beg. She would not break. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time dissolved into the steady drip of water somewhere above. Then she heard Felix on the phone. His voice was calm, almost polite. "Mr. Coleman, I assume you know who this is. Don't bother calling the police. By the time they find us, your little protege will be long gone. If you want her alive, you'll meet me tomorrow. Bring the documents I asked for, and no one else." There was a pause, and though she couldn't hear Adam's words, she could imagine the tension in his voice. Felix chuckled. Good. I knew you'd be reasonable. When he hung up, silence filled the warehouse again. Michael paced restlessly. Felix leaned against a crate, his eyes gleaming. Tomorrow, everything he built comes crashing down. Poetic, isn't it? The man who saved the lost girl loses everything because of her. Emily's voice cut through the quiet, hoarse but steady. You think this will make you powerful? You'll end up just another bitter man with nothing. Felix turned toward her, smiling faintly. And you, my dear, will end up a memory. Pretty words for the evening news. Tragic end for a girl who dreamed too high. Michael's jaw tightened. For a moment he looked almost human again. Shut up, Felix. But Felix only laughed. At dawn, Adam drove alone toward the industrial district. The police had wanted to intervene, but he refused. If they see you, he'll panic, he said to the detective on the phone. Just be ready. Yet as he drove, his mind raced. Not with fear, but with resolve. He had spent his life building systems, solving problems, controlling outcomes, but nothing had prepared him for the thought of losing Emily. When he reached the warehouse, the sun was barely rising. Felix stood outside, waiting, hands in his pockets. Michael beside him, looking uneasy. Adam stepped out of the car, holding a briefcase. Where is she? He demanded. Inside, Felix said smoothly. Alive, as promised. Let's not make this unpleasant. You have what I asked for? Adam lifted the case. Release her first. Felix smiled. I'm afraid that's not how trust works. Before the standoff could break, a sudden sound split the air. Sirens, distant but growing. Michael's head snapped toward the road. You called the police? He shouted. Felix's expression twisted. You fool, he hissed at Adam. Do you know what you've done? Inside the warehouse, Emily heard the commotion. She strained against her bindings until the rope tore her skin. The noise outside grew louder. Shouting, footsteps. Then the door burst open. SAM's voice rang out, strong and familiar. Emily! She cried out, and within seconds he was there, cutting the ropes. You're safe now, he said. Outside, chaos erupted. Felix tried to run, but officers surrounded him before he reached the fence. Michael stood frozen, his face pale. As they dragged Felix away, he spat curses, his voice fading beneath the wail of sirens. Michael didn't resist arrest. He simply lowered his head, as if something inside him had already surrendered. When it was over, Adam found Emily standing near the doorway, her wrists raw, her hair tangled. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, I told him he'd end up with nothing. Adam's voice was quiet. And you were right. She swayed, exhaustion overtaking her. He caught her before she fell. In the days that followed, the news spread quickly. Kidnapping scandal ends in arrests. CEO's ward rescued. Reporters once again filled the headlines with her name, but this time it wasn't pity they wrote about. It was strength. Adam refused all interviews, saying only that the story belongs to her now. Emily spent weeks recovering. When the bruises faded, she returned to work at the foundation, though something in her had changed. She carried herself differently, with the calm of someone who had walked through fire and come out unburned. The official opening of Second Chance took place in early autumn, in a renovated brick building near the heart of the city. The air was crisp and banners fluttered in the wind. The hall was full. Donors, volunteers, young people who had come to see what hope looked like. When Emily took the stage, the crowd fell silent. She stood behind the podium for a long moment, her hands steady, her voice soft but clear. A year ago, she began, I was invisible. I lived in the corners of the city, unseen and unheard. One act of kindness changed everything. But kindness alone isn't enough. It must be shared, multiplied, and carried forward. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. This foundation is not about saving people. It's about giving them the chance to save themselves. Because every person deserves one more try, a second chance. Applause rose like thunder. Among the crowd, Adam stood near the back, his eyes shining with quiet pride. He didn't need credit or recognition. Seeing her there was enough. She had become the person he had always believed she could be. After the ceremony, Emily stepped outside, breathing in the cool air. The city stretched before her, alive and endless. She thought of her parents, of the long nights under bridges, of hunger and fear, and the moment when a stranger had chosen to see her. Life had circled back to this, not the end of her story, but the beginning of something greater. As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting gold across the windows, she whispered to herself, "One plate of food, one hand extended. That's all it takes to change a life." And somewhere deep inside, she knew her journey had only just begun. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with your friends. Check out my next videos. There's a lot more great content waiting for you.